time to talk about the all-girls clown college, Florida State. And before you Seminole man gets mad and clicks off the video, I'm high on Florida State this year. I had Florida State ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in my first preseason ranking that I did back in February. I updated that a couple of weeks ago. You can click back and watch the video if you want, but I've got them in my top, 6, 7? I think Florida State's going to be good this year. But yeah, they're an all-girl clowns college. It is what it is. They used to be an all-girls school, and they have a circus college there. So what are you going to do? You got to crack a couple of jokes there. I've been making a few videos about some of the point spreads that have come out on some of the bigger games within college football, and I've kind of been focusing on one or two teams in each video, and then a lot of you have been leaving suggestions for some other teams or games in the comments. So I did a Tennessee one, I did an Ohio State one. I've had several people ask about Florida State. I had some people ask about Florida State and Clemson, then ask about Florida State and LSU. A lot of people ask about Florida State in particular. So we're going to do a Florida State version of that video. I've got the list pulled up over here, the early lines that are out on some of these games. A couple of people are commenting, nobody cares about point spreads in May. Yeah, they do. They're called gamblers. Dummy! Gamblers care. The same people who care about point spreads in May are the same people that care about point spreads during the season. Gamblers. These lines are going to change a lot in some cases between now and when these games are played. Let me give you an example. The Florida-Tennessee game right now is about 7.5 in Tennessee's favor, okay? That's played, I think, week 4 of the season. Well, what if Florida's got 2 losses already by the time that game is played and Tennessee has beat everybody 45-10? That line's going to go up to 14, 15, 16, 17 points. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Tennessee ends up being like a 2-touchdown favorite by the time that game is played. It's at 7.5 now. So if you have feelings like that one way or the other about particular teams or games, now's a great time to bet it. Because some of these lines are way off right now versus what they're going to be when the games are played. So you can get on the positive side of one of these lines. Florida State and LSU, which is the first game on the list here that we're going to talk about today, is an example of this. When these lines first came out, which was only about a week ago, LSU was a 1.5 point favorite over Florida State. I pulled it up just now for this video so I could go through it and give you the odds. And it's now a pick'em. 0. No favorite one way or the other. It's literally even pick'em between LSU and Florida State. So what does that mean? How do lines and numbers change? They change when people bet on the games. So when this game was put out and LSU was listed as a 1.5 point favorite, a lot of people obviously started betting on Florida State. And that moved the line in Florida State's favor, and now it's a pick'em. So, yes, some people do actually care about point spreads or odds on games in May. But even if you're not a gambler, point spreads and odds give you a pretty good idea of the general public's overall feeling about a team or a game, right? So, obviously, the overall public, the college football public, doesn't think LSU should have been a 1.5 point favorite over FSU because that line has been bet to even. It's now 0-0. Anyway, gambling 101 for some of you that maybe don't participate in that kind of thing. But LSU and Florida State's going to be a huge game. I've got them both ranked really, really high. I need to change this shelf around. This bottom shelf is my top 15. That's still the top 15 from February. I haven't changed it yet. I'll do that after this video. I'll change that shelf around and put the updated top 15 on the bottom. Anyway, I'm high on both LSU and Florida State, and I truly believe the winner of the LSU-Florida State game has a legitimate shot at that point to make the college football playoff. Because if you're good enough to beat LSU, you're good enough to be a playoff contender. If you're good enough to beat Florida State, you're good enough to be a playoff contender probably. You're going to have a leg up there. And the loser of that game is going to have some catching up to do because everybody's going to talk about how they lost week 1 until they play another big game. In Florida State's case, if they lose this game, they really won't have a chance to redeem themselves until they play Clemson later in the year, in my opinion. And I'm going to be honest with you about Florida State. I don't know that they're a playoff team. I don't know that LSU's I don't know that either one of them's a playoff team. I think they're sort of second or third tier when it comes to potential or contenders for the playoffs this year. You got, stating the obvious here, you Georgia, Ohio State, Bama, Michigan, whatever, the teams that you think are in the upper echelon of college football. Then you got like a tier below that that's maybe, Southern Cal, Clemson, maybe one other Pac-12 team, whoever you think, maybe Washington or Oregon, whichever one's better, whatever. And then you've got like Texas, Florida State, LSU, those type of so they have chances to make the playoffs. I think. I don't particularly think either one of them will make the playoffs in 2023, but both have legitimate. They both have a legitimate chance. But I think Florida State, with what they have coming back, returning almost 90% of their production from last year, Heisman candidate at quarterback, did great in the transfer portal, a superstar on defense, and a good defense overall. They should win 10-plus games this year. If they were to lose to LSU and Clemson, although that wouldn't be ideal for Florida State, it's understandable. Those are two really good teams. When you look at Florida State's schedule, there's really no reason they should lose to anybody else this season other than those two. Worst case scenario should be 10-2 for Florida State. I don't know if they'll get there. It's hard to win every game you're supposed to win. We'll see. Road games can be tricky. You never know what types of injuries might pop up, but Florida State has every reason to expect a 10-2 season, bare minimum, I think, in 2023. I think anything less than that, anything less than playing Clemson twice this year is going to be a disappointment for Florida State. And to the people that are saying, oh, here they go, hyping up Florida State again. No one has hyped up Florida State in 8 years. It's been 2015, 2016 since anybody even thought about Florida State. Other than laughing at Willie Taggart, nobody has really even thought about Florida State in almost a decade. So, yeah, there are certain teams that maybe people get out in front of, myself included. Michigan for a long time. I was way out in front on Michigan for years and years and years, and they never delivered. Texas, Miami, Tennessee, kind of these perpetually we're back type teams. That hasn't been Florida State. Florida State's been a bad team for the majority of the last decade. They're not that now. They had a good year last year. They 9-3 in the regular season or something like that. They should be able to improve on that this year. Anything short of playing in the ACC title game, I think for Florida State is going to be a disappointment. But line movement on the LSU-Florida State game, when this came out a week ago, LSU was a 1.5-point favorite. It's now a pick'em. It's now even, no spread one way or the other. Let's continue on and see what other Florida State games they have mentioned in here. Speaking of Florida State and Clemson, this is a road game on the road in Death Valley at Clemson. The Florida State-LSU game, by the way, is a neutral site game. I think most people know that. Technically a neutral site game, right? This is a 2-game series. The first game of the series was played last year, not at LSU in Baton Rouge, but in New Orleans, neutral site. This year, LSU travels to Florida, not Tallahassee, but Orlando, I believe, is where this game is being played. So, neutral site game. But the Florida State-Clemson game, this is an ACC game. This is the first year, by the way, no divisions in the ACC. So you don't have to worry about Clemson winning any type of division or who else might be in their division. There are no divisions in the ACC. The ACC is going to operate this season the same way the Pac-12 operated last season. At the end of the year, they're just going to take the 2 best teams and they're going to play. That's just it. That's all there is to it. There is no divisions. The 2 best teams with the 2 best conference records, which is important. Conference records. If Florida State loses to LSU, that does nothing to impact their ability to make the ACC title game. It's not a conference loss. When the ACC goes to pick the conference, the 2 participants for the conference championship game at the end of the season, it's going to be conference record. That's going to be what they look at first. So, Florida State on the road at Clemson. Clemson, a 2.5-point favorite. Generally in the betting world, especially in college football, you get about 2 or 3 points for home field advantage. So this is telling you that Vegas basically feels that Florida State and Clemson are about even, about a pick'em. And they're leaning in the favor of Clemson at -2.5, a 2.5-point favorite, with the game being in Death Valley, the game being at Clemson. Clemson should be better offensively this year than they were last year, but we said that last year. Now, DJ Ukulele's gone. Cade Klubnik is the full-time starter now. They've got a new offensive coordinator in Garrett Riley, which I think is a huge improvement over Streeter, who they had last year for 1 year. He was a one-and-done guy. And look, I give Dabo a lot of hell, and he deserves it for a lot of the stuff he's done and said and some decisions he's made over the last few years. But he didn't wait around with the Streeter thing. He made the hire. He realized it was wrong. He pulled the trigger and got rid of him after just 1 year. So you got to give him credit for that. Yeah, he screwed up in hiring him, but he got rid of him first chance he got in just 1 year. Now he's gone. Garrett Riley, huge improvement there. Clemson loses a ton off the defensive side of the ball to the NFL draft, but Clemson recruits really, really well, especially within the ACC, and they recruit particularly well in the defensive front, linebackers and defensive line. Secondary has been a little bit of a concern for Clemson the last couple of years. Of course, they got lit up a couple of times last year. Tennessee lit them up in the postseason. Wake Forest lit them up in the regular season. Spencer Rattler in South Carolina moved up and down the field on them in a win at Death Valley. Could Clemson lose another home game? Yeah, they could. Of course they could. It's happened before. It happened to South Carolina. Clemson had the longest home winning streak in the country before they lost to South Carolina. But Clemson is a 2.5-point home favorite against Florida State. And to me, this makes sense. When you're the Florida State, look, it's not exactly the same, but it's similar, right? Clemson has been the top dog in the ACC for a while now, right? Alabama was the top dog in the SEC for a while. And Georgia had a couple of swings and misses at them, right? Before they finally knocked them out. This is another chance for Florida State. Florida State played Clemson last year and lost. This is another chance for Florida State to try to get to the top of the mountain in the ACC. And so this will be a huge game, one of the biggest games of the college football season, especially if Florida State has beaten LSU earlier in the year. And both of these teams are undefeated. You're talking about probably 2 top 5 teams if both of these teams are undefeated, because that means Clemson will be undefeated and Florida State will be undefeated and have beaten LSU. So this could be a top 5 matchup, September 23rd, early in the season. Let's see. What else do they have on here for Florida State? I know they'll have the Florida game at the end of the year. Let's see if they have any other conference games listed. They don't have every game on here yet. These are just some of the bigger games or some of the more important games, or some of the games that people will tend to be more interested in. They don't have every single game for every single team on here yet. Clemson only a 10-point favorite over Miami. That's a little surprising. It is a road game, but Miami doesn't even have a home stadium, so there's really no home field advantage at Miami. I'm kind of surprised Clemson's only a 10-point favorite there. But this is a Florida State video. I'm not going to waste time on the Taters. Tater man. Where's Florida State? Notre Dame and Clemson? No, I'm looking for Florida State. Here you go. Miami and Florida State. Now, this is another... College football is about matchups. You hear all the time that you can't use the transitive property in college football, right? Just because this team beats that team and that team beats that team doesn't mean the first team can beat the third team type of deal. So Florida State was, Clemson was, a 10-point favorite over Miami. Florida State's a 16.5-point favorite over Miami. So Florida State's a bigger favorite over Miami than Clemson is, but Clemson's favored over Florida State. This tells you the importance of matchups and home field advantage, because this game is at Florida State. They're favored by 16.5. The Clemson-Miami game was in Miami. But Florida State's favored by 16.5 over Miami. Beat the absolute soul and will to live out of them last year. Miami just an absolutely horrendous season in 2023. God, Jesus. I got too many helmets. Look at this. I'm about to trip over my damn helmets over there. Dummy! What was I saying? Oh, yeah, Miami was terrible last year. I don't think... Look, Miami and Texas A&M. Well, Miami, Texas A&M, Nebraska, and Wisconsin, I think will all be improved this year in terms of overall record. But Miami's not going to be as bad as they were last year. That's great. I don't think they're good enough to beat Florida State, though, especially on the road in Tallahassee. Not happening. Florida State probably wins that game. Vegas agrees. They have them as a 16.5-point favorite right now. I could do a Miami. I saw something interesting about what has happened to Miami fans, by the way, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. Miami fans have been some of the most delusional, ignorant, loudest, dumbest, and wrongest fans on the internet since I've been on YouTube. This has been the quietest offseason I've ever heard from Miami fans. The quietest. You usually see comments or videos or posts and stuff everywhere about, oh, Miami going to do this. Miami, we got this guy, we got that guy. This is the year. It's unusually quiet offseason for the Miami man. Now, that means one of two things. They've just gotten tired and given up of the whole, off-season champions routine that they like to do year in, year out. Or they've come to the reality that, hey, you know what? We're not the U. This ain't the 90s. Ed Reed ain't walking through that door. And maybe we need to shut up for a while. I don't know which it is. But to the Miami man's credit, they seem to be a lot more reasonable, rational, and realistic this offseason than I've ever seen them before. And my buddy Coach Coop, who runs a Miami channel, he did a season preview stream the other day that I clicked on and hung out and watched some of. And basically, he put Miami's schedule up. And this was 95% Miami fans in the chat. Coop's channel is a Miami channel. He's not like my channel where it does kind of all of college football. It's a Miami channel only. So you go to a live stream, 99% of the people there are Miami fans, right? He put the schedule up on the screen, and then he created a poll for each individual game on the schedule. So first he did a poll for the first game. Will Miami win or will they lose? Then he did the second game, third game, all the way through into the regular season. When I saw that he was live and clicked on the video, they were in week 4 or 5, something like that. The poll, the people had voted that they were going to beat Texas A&M early in the year, and at this point they were sitting at like 4-0 and 5-0 according to the comment section polls that they were doing. And I made a comment and I just said, man, these delusional people are going to pick Miami to go 12-0. They are. And Coop read the comment and said a few things about it or whatever. And anyway, I wasn't able to watch the entire live stream. I had to click off. Well, I went back the next day and clicked on it. And do you know that they did not pick Miami to go 12-0? They picked them to go 9-3. Now, I'm not sure Miami can get to 9-3 this year, but that's not the point. I don't think picking Miami to go 9-3 is completely potato. I especially don't think that an audience comprised of 95% Miami fans picking them to go 9-3 is potato. I thought for sure they'd just pick them to go 12-0. They actually had them losing 3 games. I can't remember exactly which 3 games it was, but Florida State game was one of them. So they're a 16-point underdog to Florida State. I think Florida State probably wins at home, but there you go. That's the Miami-Florida State game. Let's see what else they have on here for Florida State. It might just be the Florida game at the end of the year at this point. Let's see. Yeah, because we're into November here. Florida State and Florida. This is a road game for the Seminoles. A pretty good game last year between Florida State and Florida. Surprisingly so, in my opinion. I think Florida State was a much better team last year than Florida. But for whatever reason, Florida did hang in there with them last year in Tallahassee before coming up short. This game's in Gainesville, end of the year, Thanksgiving weekend. Florida State, a 9.5-point favorite on the road against the Gators. And look, I pay pretty good attention to what goes on at Florida as a Georgia fan. They're not very good. They're not very good this year. They could have their 3rd losing season in a row. It's hard to believe, but yes, Florida has had not 1 but 2 losing seasons in a row and are in serious danger of having their 3rd losing season in a row. They're 2nd under Sunbelt Billy, head coach Billy Napier. Their offensive line was their strong suit last year. They lost 4 out of 5 starters there. They were a good running team last year, and ETN comes back at running back, who I really, really like, but again, losing 4 or 5 on the offensive line. And as bad as Anthony Richardson was at throwing the ball, his ability to run had a huge impact on Florida's running game, and Anthony Richardson is gone. He's off to the NFL. He's done tricked the Colts into drafting him at 4. So you can forget about the Indianapolis Colts for the next 10 years. You can't make a mistake that big and recover from it. But anyway, they don't really have a wide receiver that scares anybody. That Ricky Pearsall is a good wide receiver. He's not great, definitely doesn't scare anybody. And the quarterback situation is just atrocious. It's just an absolute mess. Anthony Richardson off to the NFL. The backup in jail for child pornography. The 3rd string, Jack Legg, terrible. He played against Oregon State in the bowl game. Looked like he'd never seen a football. Not Oregon State, Oklahoma. Or who did Florida play in the bowl game? Was it Oklahoma? Anyway, doesn't matter. Who did Florida play in the damn bowl game? That's going to drive me up crazy. That's going to drive me. It was Oregon State, wasn't it? No. I'm drawing a blank. There's so much going on in here. Anyway, he played in the bowl game and he was absolutely horrible. So they brought in Graham Mertz in the transfer portal, who has been at Wisconsin for a couple of years, shitting down his own leg. It's just not good. I do think Florida may be better defensively this year than they have been the last couple of years. I do buy that. I like the guy they brought in as defensive coordinator, and they do have some pieces on defense. They do. But they're going to have a hard time scoring, I think, in 2023. Florida State should win that game. It's a road game to the end of the year. Who knows? In these rivalry games, anything can happen. The game last year was way closer than it should have been. And let's say Florida State's sitting here in this game and they're 10-1, right? Or even 11-0. Florida would love nothing more, especially if Florida season goes down the toilet, which it most likely is. Florida would love nothing more than to ruin Florida State's season there at the end of the year. It's a home game for the Gators. We'll see, but Florida State's a 9.5-point favorite in that one. So there you go. Some thoughts on Florida State, and a look at the lines and odds on some of the bigger games for them coming up this season, 2023 college football season, which we're in May now. So, May, June, July, 3 more months, and then the games start towards the end of August. It'll be here before you know it. All right, appreciate y'all watching. Have a great day.